A very important case from the Supreme Court of India dealing with industrial pollution is the Taj Trapezium case from the year 1997, also known as MC Mehta versus Union of India and others. This case concerned the effects of air pollution on the Taj Mahal in Agra. According to the petitioner, the sources of air pollution in this particular case were foundries, chemical hazardous industries and the Mathura refinery, brick kilns, vehicular traffic and generator sets that were being extensively used in the area surrounding the Taj. The court applied the precautionary principle, which has been discussed in detail in the module on principles of environmental law, and which states that environmental measures must anticipate, prevent and attack the causes of environmental degradation. According to the court, the burden of proof in this particular case was on the coke or coal consuming industry to show that its operations are environmentally benign. According to the court, the emissions generated by these industries are air pollutants and they have a damaging effect on the Taj and the people living in the TTZ or the Taj Trapezium zone. According to the court, further, atmospheric pollution in the TTZ has to be eliminated at any cost. And the reason this case is very interesting is because the court goes on to say that not even 1% chance can be taken when human life and the preservation of a prestigious monument is involved. In other words, the court is prioritizing human life and the preservation of a monument such as the Taj Mahal over industrial activities in the area. The court then directed the identified industries to either change over to natural gas as an industrial fuel, and the industries which could not obtain a natural gas connection were asked to stop functioning with the aid of coke or coal in the TTZ and to relocate away from this particular area. Moving on to another important source of air pollution, which is vehicular pollution. Under the Air Act, the State Pollution Control Board has laid down standards for emission of air pollutants from automobiles in consultation with the Central Pollution Control Board. These standards, known as the Standards for Emissions of Smoke, Vapour, etc. from motor vehicles, require the state government to give necessary instructions to the Vehicle Registration Authority under the Motor Vehicles Act of 1989 as well. Under the Motor Vehicles Act, certain powers have been given to the central government. One is to prescribe emission standards for vehicles and to frame rules to regulate the construction, equipment and maintenance of motor vehicles in relation to emission of smoke, visible vapour, sparks, ashes, grit or oil, and in case of contravention of these provisions, the punishment is a fine. There are also provisions of the Central Motor Vehicle Rules of 1989 which are relevant to air pollution. The first one is setting of nationwide emission levels for old and new diesel and petrol engine vehicles. The manufacturer is required to certify conformance to these particular standards, and these standards are identical to the emission standards for motor vehicles under the Environment Protection Rules 1989. Under the Central Motor Vehicles Rules of 1989, you are also required to obtain a Pollution Under Control certificate for vehicles, also known as a PUC. The enforcement of all of these vehicular pollution related provisions is the responsibility of the state or the regional transport authority appointed under the Motor Vehicles Act. The Supreme Court has issued a large number of orders relating to air pollution in general and vehicular pollution specifically, and this is often quoted as one of the major differences between the implementation of the Water Act and the Air Act, where the Water Act implementation has suffered seriously, whereas the implementation of the Air Act and the provisions there has been taken on quite seriously by the Supreme Court of India. For example, we have orders from the Supreme Court relating to mandatory use of catalytic converters for specific type of vehicles, introduction and use of unleaded petrol for motor vehicles, conversion of vehicles from the use of petrol, diesel to CNG or compressed natural gas, setting up of a time frame for the gradual phasing out and banning of old commercial or transport vehicles from the roads of Delhi, also conformity of certain vehicles depending upon their date of registration in the National Capital Region to Euro 1 and Euro 2 norms. More recently, earlier this year, the Supreme Court has issued notices to the central government as well as the state governments of Delhi, Haryana, Rajasthan and Uttar Pradesh on certain actions. These include uniform Bharat Stage 4 standards nationwide and tighter emission standards, effective gap between diesel and CNG prices, lower taxes on buses, uniform vehicle tax measures across the National Capital Region or the NCR, and effective increase in parking pricing and enforcement to cut car usage. The third major source of air pollution is noise pollution, and the sources of noise pollution include microphones and loudspeakers used in religious ceremonies and public meetings, electric and air horns used in buses and trucks, as well as fireworks. As previously mentioned, noise is recognized as one of the pollutants under the Air Act. It is also recognized as an environmental pollutant under the Environment Protection Act of 1986. There are also other relevant laws for noise pollution control, and these include local municipal laws as well as state-level police laws. Under the Environment Protection Rules of 1986, standards for emission or discharge of environmental pollutants from industries, operations or processes include standards with respect to noise pollution, and these include noise level standards for coal mines, noise limits for automobiles, noise limits for domestic appliances and construction equipment at the manufacturing stage, as well as noise limits for generator sets run with petrol or kerosene or diesel. More specifically, a noise pollution regulation and control rules were framed in the year 2000 and amended in the year 2010. Framed by the Ministry of Environment and Forests, these rules prescribe the maximum permissible limits for noise in different areas. They lay down ambient air quality standards in respect of noise for industrial areas, commercial areas, residential areas or silence areas or zones. In these areas, use of loudspeakers or public address system and sound producing instruments is subject to written permission. The rules also prescribe permissible noise level at the boundary of a public place or a private place where a noise source is used. They prohibit the use of horns, sound emitting construction equipment and bursting of firecrackers in silence zones or during night time, and night time is defined as the period between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. and this rule applies to residential areas, and the violation of any of these rules is punishable under the Environment Protection Act 1986.